So one day I was pumping gas and a huge tanker pulled up and started filling the tanks. And it made me wonder, just how much fuel is there in the world? No, not still in the ground, I mean refined and used by humans. Hi, I'm Bob with Get Details. These are Mega Guzzlers, the world's worst gas mileage. There must be an ocean of fuel floating around in pipelines, tankers, fuel tanks, and cars and trucks. So I did some research and it turns out, yeah, there is a huge amount of gasoline and diesel and aviation and heavy fuel oil consumed every single day. If you add the 15 largest consumers of gasoline, we get roughly 841 million gallons a day. But notice this, over half of the gasoline used every single day in the entire world is used in the United States. To get the same amount, you have to add number 2 through 15. It's a staggering amount, but there's even more diesel being used every day. And that's more popular in most other countries, including Europe and Asia. Adding gasoline and diesel numbers together, we have about 1.5 billion gallons of hydrocarbon fuels floating through pipelines, trucks, fuel stations, and engines. Now that sounds like a huge amount, but it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it. So let's do a little visual math. Say we have 1.5 billion gallons of fuel, and each gallon takes up 0.1337 cubic feet. So for the total amount of fuel we use every day around the world, we need a space of about 201 million cubic feet. Now how big is that? It's larger than any building on the planet, that's for sure. But a one-day supply is not enough to overflow Lake Erie or anything like that. But at the end of the video, we will do some quick math and find out just how much fuel that really is. Now, naturally, I have to wonder who is using all this fuel. Surely it's not all going into SUVs and Civics. While efficiency normally is the goal, there are some vehicles that don't give a darn about stats. They're huge and thirsty and don't care if you don't like it. Here are the Mega Guzzlers, the world's worst gas mileage. Or in other words, the worst fuel economy. Or is it? We'll find out more about that at the end. But let's start out with our major category of fuel users. There are huge trucks and airplanes, and how about gigantic ships? And then you have over-the-road vehicles and even motorcycles. So let's find out who in the world is using all that fuel every day. Starting with two wheels. There are some bikes that are known for size and power, and I'm thinking about you, Harley-Davidson, Electric Glides, and Road Kings. But the currently produced motorcycle that gets the worst fuel mileage is a very nice bike. The Indian Roadmaster is nicely sized, 104 inches long, 40.2 inches wide, and 891 pounds. It has a top speed of about 115 miles an hour, but the stat we're interested in is fuel economy, or lack thereof. As a motorcycle, you would expect it to get good mileage, and compared to the other vehicles on this list, it does. But as the least efficient motorcycle, the Indian Roadmaster gets about 40 miles per gallon. Compare that to the largest Harley CVO at about 44 miles per gallon. Next, let's add a couple of wheels and find out which automobiles have the absolute worst gas mileage of cars currently produced and available in the United States. First off, there are several Rolls-Royces and Bugattis that get 9 miles per gallon or less. But they're lucky to see about 2,500 miles of driving a year on average. So let's look at the more attainable vehicles, SUVs. Thanks to federal CAFE standards, all vehicle manufacturers are required to make their fleets as efficient as possible, in theory. So that's why most of the SUVs and high-performance cars have mileages of at least 14 to 18 miles per gallon. But there is one mainline vehicle that gets less, and that is the Dodge Durango SRT all-wheel drive. It's a tough, heavy brute of a vehicle built more for power than finesse, and it gets about 13 miles per gallon. Moving up the vehicular pecking order, we come to the semis, big trucks that haul just about everything you eat, drink, wear, or use. Big trucks are big fuel users. And there's several with very similar fuel consumption, including these beautiful rigs that provide most of the comforts of home for over-the-road truckers, including the Freightliner Cascadia Evolution and the Kenworth T680. But the slightly larger Peterbilt 579 gets the poorest fuel mileage at about 6 to 7 miles per gallon. That's why it has two 150-gallon saddle tanks for a range of close to 2,000 miles. But all that fuel is adding up to an ocean of gas and diesel the world uses every day. Next up, let's step it up. Because you need steps to get into the driver's seat of this huge mining truck. Look at the size of this beast. Not the size of a house, it's the size of a city block. These huge mining machines work all day, every day, transporting unimaginably large amounts of ore, coal, or whatever they haul. This kind of truck is very specialized. Only certain operations can justify its size and expense. So there are only a few companies that build them, including Caterpillar and the humongous 797, the Komatsu 960E, and the king of the thirsty trucks, the Liebherr T282B. This massively mammoth machine lumbers along at a top speed of 42 miles an hour while consuming upwards of 77 gallons per hour, or approximately 0.3 of a gallon per mile. But when you take a look at the bed of this behemoth, you'll understand. It's about 30 feet wide and nearly as deep. And speaking of deep, let's take a deep plunge with the largest ships on Earth and some of the biggest users of fuel on the planet. Up until now, we basically stuck to miles per gallon, except for the Liebherr, which was fuel consumed per hour. Ships go by tonnage. The most commonly used fuel on cargo ships, accounting for about 80% of all fuel consumed, is heavy fuel oil, like the kind used in residential furnaces. It's left over after the refining of crude oil, and it's relatively cheap compared to other fuels. However, it can often be high in sulfur and other pollutants. An ultra-large container vessel, or ULCV, is too large for the Panama Canal because it has to be large enough for cargo and fuel. A ship this size can go through 400 tons of fuel a day at top speed. Now, doing the math, that's about 111,000 gallons every 24 hours, or 16.5 tons per hour. They can carry about 3,000 tons of fuel while transporting 120 tons of cargo. And finally, let's look up for the highest fuel users up in the sky, where huge airliners measure fuel by tons. There are two major players in the passenger airliner business, Airbus and Boeing. The Boeing 747-8 and the Airbus A380 are the world's largest passenger planes. Depending on which source you use, they're nearly tied for fuel usage. But notice while the 747 can carry up to 660 passengers, the Airbus can carry almost 200 more. The Airbus has a fuel capacity of about 85,000 gallons of aviation fuel. The rate of fuel usage is about 1 gallon per second for the Boeing and 1.3 gallons per second for the Airbus. That's about 4,560 gallons per hour. And remember, there are 129 A380s and 151 747-8s in service every day. All these numbers can make your head swim. And speaking of swimming, just how much fuel is used every day compared to an area we might be able to relate to? Now, every day, if you took all the fuel and you put it in a lake the size of Boston or San Francisco, it would rise 2 inches a day. And by the end of the year, it would be over 60 feet deep. That's 5 or 6 stories. Just don't strike a match, right? Hey, thanks for watching and visualizing the vast amounts of hydrocarbons we use every day. Be sure to check out our other fascinating and fact-filled videos on a variety of intriguing subjects. And get details.